Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. These are a series of fantasy stories and they are completely fiction, but they are written by myself, not so long, but completely fiction fantasy stories, just so we can keep breaking off from the fairy tales and we can still do the fairy tales, but this is like something to do in between. So, the first fantasy story, and they're not long, bear in mind, is called My Saviour is a Werewolf. The Devourer family, who lived in Greyskull village, were those of pure witch blood, rare, beautiful, definitely not to be crossed. It's safe to say no one did. At these lands, though, each generation you will find a few true witches of the correct and pure blood. Verisine is one of the most gifted in the Devourer family. Her skills are so rare than most witches actually. She's highly skilled pharmacy and medicine, and it was expected of the whole village that she would be the next magic high priestess. One morning, Vilsini was doing her usual rounds. She had out every morning. She would practice casting spells. She pushed open the large wooden door, where she suddenly realised there, slumped to the ground, was a handsome young man, passed out. And as she slowly leaned towards him, so not to startle him, she realised he seemed to have some serious injuries, and this is why he was passed out and slumped out the wall by her door. Being the kind woman Vilsini was, she managed to get the young man to his feet and took him into her room. Carefully, she observed the wounds, each one that was upon his body. Her knowledge told her these were the wounds of a werewolf attack. She began to treat each of the wounds, then put him to rest in her room, and every single day she fed him medicine that was needed to help with his sickness. One beautiful morning, the man finally awoke, feeling much better in strength and having more vitality. He saw there was no one around in the room at all. So he woke and he opened the door and he slowly approached the fence at the end of the backyard. In the distance of a beautiful day was scenery, beautiful scenery, and he stared into it as he remembered painful memories of the past. Chapter 2. Kindly rescued, but only received treatment he did abandon. People's hearts, one of the most unpredictable in the whole world. Extremely random. It's a little poem for chapter 2. Stefano's memory. Stefano was called Stefano by most, though his name would be Stefano if we were to look at it. And this was his name. And from his memories, he used to live in a small village. And the village was content and happy. The people farmed and they adequately kept themselves in food and their needs. Unfortunately, misfortune does tend to show up when people are so unprepared. Stefano, on a full moon's night, was practicing his sword work when, on his way home, he heard a screaming, a call for help, and he recognized the voice immediately. Liliane, his friend. A werewolf was chasing her, hunting her down, and a situation he could tell was critical. He rushed to Liliane's aid and blocked the path of the werewolf. They began to fight, a very, very fierce fight. And though Stefano did stab the werewolf with his silver blade and pierce its skin, then it would fly, obviously. It was silver. Silver burnt the werewolf. It yelped in anger and in frustration and in pain, and it ran. Yet Stefano was still injured and still bitten by the werewolf. Stefano was exhausted and injured, and he fell to the ground. It was a really critical time for him, very critical indeed for his life. He needed help. And Lily Ann cared for only her safety. She abandoned her friend who had just saved her life. She left him alone in the forest without even looking back. Chapter 3. Reward will come to good people. What is owed to you in this life will be given back in some form. The universe makes it equal. Stefano then realized he had to leave his village. For this, it was fate. The village would not accept him wounded as a werewolf. He would be hunted down and killed. So he wondered, and he wondered for a while, until he eventually collapsed near Versini's house, right near her door. Versini, being gifted, she knew in her village there was to be a catastrophe of some kind. She knew this, it was in her gut, and she knew it would come soon. Every day she made regular patrols. She arranged magical obstacles to protect the village and all the people. But she did also warn the villagers, do not go out alone, and that they should be on their guard because something was coming. Vilsini, when coming home this particular day from her rounds, she entered her home to see the man was not there. So, being who she was, her gut told her to go out the back. And she opened the back door, where she saw him, standing at the fence, gazing into the distance, as though in deep thought. That night, at dinner, Stefano revealed everything to Vilsini. Vilsini listened intently, wondering if Stefano was the catastrophe she had felt in her gut. She did not quite know, because though it would seem like a catastrophe, a werewolf turning up, she did not feel it was him. She decided it was for the best to conceal his wounds. Do not tell people what he is, for they would surely want rid of him. Chapter 4. Love always needs to make it through tests. Those who truly love each other will overcome the challenges, giving it their best. Love. Stefano gradually recovered, and he took over all of Versini's household work so she could concentrate and study on her magic, which she was so grateful for. Every day, they spent more time together. They become closer and closer, and they fell in love. Of course, fate had planned this. For sure it does seem that way. There was a positive reason Stefano was abandoned by his friend Liliane. Ultimately, it led him to Versini. Through her extra studies in magic, Versini learned to make a werewolf inhibitor. This was from ancient magic. But she also went through each ancient book of her family and found there was possibly a cure for the werewolf in him, the beast. This needed curses, and it required fangs from a powerful vampire. And this was a blood guide. The book did state this, so very difficult to do. Unfortunately, the elders of this village found out that Stefano was infected by the beast's venom. Versini pleaded and begged to let him stay because she had a potion that would stop him from transforming. She begged and begged, but they dismissed this. and they demanded Stefano be expelled from the village immediately. They told Viocini if she wished to be the next magic priestess, she was to get rid of him, do as she was told, because her destiny was to be the next magic priestess, and they would surely take this away from her. Viocini slumped and went home in a slough, very depressed, and she explained everything to Stefano. And he did not want to cause trouble for his beloved. He was determined that he must leave so she could become the next high priestess, because he wanted her to be successful. He did not want to cause her trouble. Viocini gave him the inhibitor she made him to prevent his transformation, and the two lovers reluctantly had one final kiss before going their separate ways. I am going to leave the story here for now, guys. There's a few more chapters to go. Again, complete fantasy written by me, just short stories. Thank you for listening. Please hit that like button and share if you can. Much appreciated. And we shall continue this story next time. Many blessings.